Welcome to Serial Killers Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Carter. In the early morning hours of December 11, 2010, the town of Oak Beach on Long Island, New York was quiet. The chilly winter air was still, the roads were dark, and for the most part, the residents were asleep. But on this particular morning, something was about to disturb that silence. A panicked 911 call came through. On the other end of the line was a woman, her voice trembling with fear. She was desperate, scared, and alone. This was the last known contact with Shannon Gilbert, a young woman whose mysterious disappearance would set in motion a terrifying discovery. A few months later, in the spring of 2011, Officer John Malia and his K-9 partner Blue were out conducting a routine training exercise. They were in the vicinity of Oak Beach, near the spot where Shannon was last seen. As Blue's nose worked the ground, he picked up on a scent. What they found was not Shannon. It was a burlap sack containing a set of human remains. This would be the first of 10 bodies to be unearthed along what came to be known as the Long Island serial killer's dumping ground. The victims, most of whom were young women involved in the sex trade, were disposed of with a chilling precision that suggested they were all the work of one individual, a serial killer who was still at large. The subsequent investigation, spanning over a decade, has been fraught with dead ends and unanswered questions. The victims' families have been left waiting, hoping for justice that seems ever elusive. The shocking reality is that the Long Island serial killer, also known as the Craigslist Ripper, the Gilgo Beach Killer, or the Seashore serial killer, remains unidentified. The person responsible for these heinous crimes has evaded capture, living amongst us, their identity hidden in plain sight. Yet the case is far from closed. A team of dedicated detectives, forensic anthropologists, and criminal psychologists continue to sift through the evidence, determined to unravel the twisted psyche of this yet unknown murderer. They labor under the weight of the haunting question, who is the Long Island serial killer? This question, and the desperate search for its answer, has sent shockwaves through the community, sparking fear, speculation, and a desperate need for closure. It's a race against the clock, as every passing moment gives the killer another chance to strike. The story of the Long Island serial killer is a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected corners of our world, a darkness that we will continue to shed light on in the investigative journey we have embarked upon. The towns of Gilgo Beach and Oak Beach, where the bodies were discovered, are quiet, unassuming hamlets along the south shore of Long Island, New York. They're part of Suffolk County, a region that's often viewed as a picturesque escape from the urban intensity of nearby Manhattan. With their sandy beaches, quaint houses, and close-knit communities, these towns seem like unlikely locations for such gruesome discoveries. The period when the bodies were found, between 2010 and 2011, was a time of relative tranquility in the area. The economy was slowly recovering from the 2008 financial crisis, and there was a sense of optimism in the air. The region was bustling with tourism, and life seemed to be getting back on track. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, a more sinister reality was unfolding. The discovery of the bodies would shatter the peaceful illusion, revealing an underbelly of crime and violence that had long been overlooked. The social fabric of Suffolk County was diverse and complex. It was a place where the affluent and the struggling coexisted, sometimes uneasily. The victims, many of whom were involved in the sex trade, were part of a marginalized community often ignored by society. Their profession made them vulnerable, easy targets for a predator who knew how to exploit these societal blind spots. The revelation of the killings brought an abrupt end to the area's tranquility. Fear spread like wildfire through the towns of Gilgo Beach and Oak Beach. Residents locked their doors, suspicious of every unfamiliar face. The crimes cast a long, dark shadow over the area, transforming the picturesque beach towns into places of horror and suspicion. Yet, amidst the fear, there was also a palpable sense of determination. This was a community that refused to be defined by the crimes that had occurred within its borders. They rallied together, supporting the victims' families and assisting law enforcement in their quest for justice. The Long Island serial killer case unfolded in a place of contrasts, a picturesque, peaceful setting shaken by horrific violence, a tight-knit community grappling with a deeply unsettling mystery. The story of these crimes, and the ongoing search for the killer, is as much about the places and people affected as it is about the unspeakable acts themselves. As we delve deeper into this unsettling saga, we will see how a community, in the face of unimaginable horror, fights back against the darkness. The first known victim in the Long Island serial killer case was Maureen Brainard Barnes, a 25-year-old woman from Norwich, Connecticut. She was reported missing on July 9, 2007, after she failed to return home from a trip to New York City, where she had gone to meet a client. Brainard Barnes was a single mother of 2 children, working in the sex trade to make ends meet. Her body was discovered on December 11, 2010, in Gilgo Beach, establishing the first connection to the serial killer. Shortly after Brainard Barnes's disappearance, in September 2007, the second victim, Megan Waterman, vanished. A 22-year-old woman from South Portland, Maine, Waterman was last seen leaving a motel in Hauppauge, New York. Like Brainard Barnes, Waterman was also involved in the sex trade, using Craigslist to advertise her services. The third victim, Amber Lynn Costello, disappeared in September 2010. Costello, 27, hailed from North Babylon, New York, and she too was involved in the sex trade, working as an escort to provide for herself. Her last known client was a man who had contacted her through Craigslist, offering a substantial amount for her services. The fourth known victim, Melissa Barthelemy, vanished in July 2009. At 24 years old, she had moved from Buffalo to New York City, where she worked as an escort. Barthelemy's younger sister received several chilling phone calls from an unidentified man, believed to be the killer, taunting her about Barthelemy's disappearance. In December 2010, a police officer and his dog stumbled across the remains of a woman while on a routine training exercise near Gilgo Beach. The body was later identified as that of Melissa Barthelemy. The discovery of Barthelemy's remains led to a more extensive search of the area, which ultimately uncovered the bodies of Brainard Barnes, Waterman, and Costello. These initial discoveries marked the beginning of a gruesome saga. The victims, all young women involved in the sex trade, had been strangled and their bodies discarded along the desolate stretch of the Ocean Parkway. The brutality of the crimes, coupled with the killer's apparent knowledge of law enforcement investigative techniques, suggested a meticulous and savvy predator, adding further layers of complexity and horror to the unfolding mystery. As the severity of the situation became apparent, law enforcement agencies intensified their efforts. The unique pattern of disposal and the victim's common profession suggested a serial killer. The Suffolk County Police Department, in collaboration with the FBI and New York State Police, undertook an extensive search of Ocean Parkway. Ground searches were augmented by aerial surveillance and marine units, probing the marshy terrain for any signs of additional victims. The killer's methodology suggested an evolving pattern. The first 4 victims were discovered in burlap sacks, leading investigators to believe that the same individual was responsible for their deaths. This modus operandi, combined with the victims' similar backgrounds and the geographical proximity of the dump sites, pointed towards a single perpetrator. However, the subsequent discoveries of more bodies, not confined to burlap sacks, seemed to deviate from the initial pattern. This raised questions among investigators. Were they dealing with one serial killer or multiple? Could copycats be exploiting the original killer's press coverage to deflect from their own crimes? These questions, while unnerving, were critical in shaping the course of the investigation. Meanwhile, the killer appeared to taunt law enforcement by making direct contact with victims' families. Melissa Barthelemy's younger sister, for instance, received a series of disturbing phone calls from an unidentified man believed to be the killer. The man, speaking with chilling calmness, seemed to derive pleasure from the pain and fear he was causing. This behavior, known as sadistic pleasure, is often seen in serial killers and provided investigators with valuable psychological insight into the type of individual they were hunting. The law enforcement agencies, despite the increasing pressure, began to piece together a profile of the killer. The victim's profession, the remote location of the dump sites, and the killer's apparent knowledge of police investigative methods suggested someone familiar with the area and possibly with law enforcement techniques. As the investigation intensified, the media attention surrounding the case grew exponentially. The unidentified serial killer was dubbed the Long Island Serial Killer, or LISK. Despite the growing public scrutiny and law enforcement efforts, the killer remained elusive, adding to the public's fear and frustration. Throughout 2011, the intense search along Ocean Parkway yielded further grim discoveries. In total, 10 bodies were found, all sharing striking similarities. The macabre finds not only confirmed the existence of a serial killer, but also alluded to a spree that had been ongoing for much longer than initially suspected. In the midst of relentless media coverage and mounting public anxiety, law enforcement faced an arduous task: to identify the person behind the moniker Long Island Serial Killer. Theories ranged from a single perpetrator to multiple killers, from a local resident to a transient, from a blue-collar worker to a white-collar professional. One of the earliest suspects was James Bissett, a local businessman who owned a nursery and landscaping business. His connection to the case was inferred from the burlap sacks in which the victims were found, similar to those used in his business. However, no direct evidence linking Bissett to the killings was ever found. Adding another layer of complexity, Bissett took his own life days after Shannan Gilbert's body was discovered, but his death was never officially connected to the case. A more controversial suspect was Dr. Peter Hackett, a former Suffolk County medical examiner. Hackett had allegedly contacted Shannan Gilbert's mother shortly after her disappearance, claiming he ran a home for wayward girls and that Shannan had been in his care. However, he later denied these claims, only to have phone records contradict his denial. Despite this suspicious behavior, Hackett was never officially named as a suspect by law enforcement. In profiling the killer, experts highlighted several key behavioral patterns. The killer was methodical, disposing of the bodies along a desolate stretch of Ocean Parkway, suggesting a high level of organization and patience. The killer's choice of victims, women involved in the sex trade, indicated someone who exploited the vulnerable, possibly to avoid detection. Psychologists pointed to the phone calls to Melissa Barthelomy's sister as a sign of a narcissistic and sadistic personality. Such behavior often indicates a need for power and control, a trait commonly seen in serial killers. This, combined with the calculated disposal of the bodies, suggested a highly intelligent individual who was confident in his ability to evade capture. The killer's apparent familiarity with police investigative methods and his ability to avoid leaving behind physical evidence hinted at someone possibly connected to law enforcement or with a deep understanding of it. Yet, without concrete leads, these theories remained speculative, contributing to the growing frustration and unease within the community. As the list of victims grew and the suspect pool remained wide, the elusive Long Island serial killer continued to baffle investigators. Despite their best efforts, the identity of the perpetrator remained shrouded in mystery, adding another chilling chapter to this horrifying tale. Despite the many hurdles in the investigation, the case saw significant breakthroughs in forensic evidence. DNA analysis proved to be a critical tool in establishing connections between the victims, which was instrumental in confirming the presence of a serial killer. In 2011, a year after the initial discoveries, forensic investigators found a skull, hands, and forearm believed to be those of a woman known as Peaches, who was previously linked to a separate cold case. The identification was made possible due to a distinctive tattoo of Peaches on her torso. This connection widened the scope of the investigation, giving credence to the theory that the killer had been active for much longer than previously thought. Another breakthrough came in 2020, when the Suffolk County Police Department released images of a previously undisclosed piece of evidence, a black leather belt embossed with the initials WH or HM. Found at one of the crime scenes, it was presumed to have been handled by the perpetrator. While the origin and owner of the belt remain unknown, it served as a significant lead, potentially linking the killer to the items. In addition to physical evidence, witness testimony played a pivotal role. The testimony of Michael Pack, Shannan Gilbert's driver on the night of her disappearance, was particularly notable. Pack claimed that Shannan had fled from his vehicle appearing frightened. While he was never officially named as a suspect, his account added a layer of complexity to the case, raising questions about Shannan's final hours. However, one of the most substantial breakthroughs came in 2020, when new DNA technology known as genetic genealogy was utilized. This technique, which helped solve the infamous Golden State Killer case, involves comparing crime scene DNA with DNA from genealogical databases to find potential relatives of a suspect. The use of this cutting-edge technology signified a significant step forward in the investigation, offering a glimmer of hope that the identity of the Long Island serial killer might one day be revealed. Despite these advancements, the investigation has not been without its setbacks. The lack of comprehensive DNA evidence and the killer's careful avoidance of leaving identifiable traces have hindered progress. Yet each piece of evidence, each witness account, and each forensic breakthrough has formed a crucial part of the mosaic that is the Long Island serial killer case. As investigators continue to piece together this complex puzzle, the quest for justice remains undeterred. As we delve deeper into the intricacies of this case, it's necessary to clarify that, despite the tireless efforts of investigators and the utilization of advanced forensic techniques, the Long Island serial killer has yet to be apprehended. This fact alone adds another layer of mystery and intrigue to an already complex case, as it has remained unresolved for over a decade. However, it hasn't been from a lack of effort. Throughout the years, several persons of interest have come under scrutiny. One such individual was James Burke, a former Suffolk County police chief. Burke's name surfaced due to his troubled past, including a prison sentence for beating a man who stole a bag of sex toys and pornography from his vehicle. Despite this, no concrete evidence has ever tied him directly to the murders, and he has never been officially named as a suspect. In addition, a local physician by the name of Dr. Peter Hackett became a person of interest after he allegedly contacted Shannan Gilbert's mother shortly after her disappearance. Dr. Hackett reportedly claimed to have treated Shannan the day she disappeared, although he later denied making the call. The Gilbert family lawyer also claimed that phone records proved the doctor had made contact. However, there was no direct evidence to link him to the crimes, and he has never been charged. Despite these leads, the case remains unsolved, and the identity of the Long Island serial killer continues to elude authorities. This lack of resolution has led to an atmosphere of unease and frustration, both in the local community and among those following the case nationally. Public reaction to the case has been a mix of fear, fascination, and frustration. The fear is palpable, particularly among the local community, as the killer remains at large. The fascination lies in the complexity and enduring mystery of the case, which has inspired numerous news reports, documentaries, and books. However, the overwhelming sentiment is one of frustration. Frustration at the lack of resolution, at the perceived mishandling of the case by local authorities, and at the enduring absence of justice for the victims and their families. This frustration has manifested in protests, online campaigns, and calls for renewed efforts in the investigation. In the absence of an arrest and trial, the courtroom of public opinion has been the primary judge and jury in the Long Island serial killer case. Yet as the years tick by with no resolution in sight, the demand for answers and justice remains as strong as ever. Delving into the mind of the Long Island serial killer is a journey into a psychological abyss, riddled with informed speculation and conjecture. Despite the lack of definitive identity, criminologists and psychologists have formulated theories on the possible motivations, past traumas, and psychological evaluations of the unknown perpetrator. A common thread among serial killers is a deep-seated need for power and control, often intertwined with sexual gratification. The Long Island serial killer's choice of victims, primarily sex workers, implies a target group that is often marginalized and less likely to be reported missing immediately. This choice suggests the killer may gain satisfaction from exerting dominance over a vulnerable population. Psychologists propose that the killer may be organized and highly intelligent, given the calculated nature of the murders and the ability to avoid detection. This intelligence may have facilitated the killer's ability to manipulate and control his victims, adding another layer to his perceived power dynamic. Trauma is often a contributing factor in the development of serial killers. While it's a leap to assume what kind of trauma the Long Island serial killer may have endured, it's plausible to suggest that a history of emotional, physical, or sexual abuse might have played a role in shaping the killer's psyche. A noteworthy observation is the geographical location of the bodies. The killer used the same dumping ground repeatedly, suggesting a territorial aspect to the crimes. This could potentially indicate a local resident, someone intimately familiar with the geography and confident enough in their knowledge to use it to their advantage. A closer look at the killer's modus operandi also reveals a level of callousness and dehumanization of the victims. The manner in which the bodies were discarded implies a level of disdain for the victims, treating them as nothing more than objects to be disposed of after use. The lack of resolution in the case further fuels speculation about the killer's current state. Could the killer have stopped, or are they continuing their violent spree elsewhere under the radar of authorities? Without a confirmed identity, the psychology of the Long Island serial killer remains largely conjectural. Yet these hypotheses provide a glimpse into the possible motivations and mindset of a killer who has managed to evade justice for over a decade. While these theories can't definitively answer the question of who the Long Island serial killer is, they shed light on the complexities of a mind capable of such heinous acts. The aftermath of the Long Island serial killer case has been marked by a lingering sense of unease and an enduring quest for justice. The case's closure brought no sense of relief, instead leaving a chilling legacy that continues to resonate. The local community, forever altered, became a place where trust was replaced by fear, and residents were confronted with the horrifying reality that a killer had once walked amongst them. This sense of tension, of unfinished business, permeated the lives of those most closely touched by the case. The families of the victims, left with unanswered questions and unhealed wounds, had to navigate their grief under the media's relentless scrutiny. They took it upon themselves to keep the memory of their loved ones alive, reminding the world that behind the headlines were real women, with lives that had been brutally cut short. The media, too, played a significant role in shaping the legacy of the Long Island serial killer. The horror of the crimes, coupled with the killer's elusive nature, made the case a source of grim fascination. Countless articles, documentaries, and books have since been devoted to dissecting the case, each adding another layer to the killer's mythos. This media attention, while crucial in keeping the case in public consciousness, has also risked turning the tragedy into a spectacle, often losing sight of the human cost. However, within this grim narrative, there are also tales of resilience. Survivors and victims' families have used their experiences to advocate for better support and protection for sex workers, the group most targeted by the killer. Their efforts have brought about a greater understanding of the dangers faced by this marginalized community, prompting calls for legislative changes to improve their safety. The Long Island serial killer case also prompted a reevaluation of investigative practices. The inability to apprehend the killer sparked debates on the effectiveness of current methods, leading to renewed focus on the use of forensic science and data analysis in solving complex cases. The specter of the unidentified killer served as a sobering reminder of the challenges still facing law enforcement. In the end, the legacy of the Long Island serial killer is one of tragic loss, unyielding resilience, and the haunting question of the killer's identity. It is a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of everyday life, a darkness that, despite the passage of time, continues to cast a long, unsettling shadow. As the case remains unresolved, the identity of the Long Island serial killer continues to elude investigators, and so too do the motivations behind the gruesome acts. Some speculate that the killer may be a person of authority, perhaps even a member of law enforcement, given the sophistication of the crimes and the apparent knowledge of police procedures. Others propose that the killer might be a resident of the area, familiar with the remote beach terrain where the bodies were found. There are also questions surrounding the possibility of more than one murderer. The differences in the victims' demographics, the methods of disposal, and the time periods in which the bodies were found have led some to suggest that the Gilgo Beach area may have been a dumping ground for multiple killers. However, this theory, like many others, remains speculative and unproven. The case has prompted discussions about the potential role of technology in solving crimes. Some wonder if advances in DNA testing and facial recognition could provide the breakthrough needed to identify the killer. Yet, despite the promise of these technologies, they are not without their limitations and ethical concerns. Perhaps the most haunting implication of the Long Island serial killer case is the spotlight it shines on society's treatment of marginalized groups. The killer preyed primarily on sex workers, a population often overlooked by society and, in some cases, by law enforcement. The case serves as a chilling reminder of the vulnerabilities these individuals face and the urgent need for their protection. The Long Island serial killer case remains an enduring mystery, its unanswered questions and unresolved details a source of frustration for investigators and a source of fear for the community. The lack of closure leaves an open wound, not only for the victims' families, but also for a society grappling with the grim reality of such a predator in their midst. In the face of these chilling unanswered questions, the memory of the victims must not be forgotten. Their lives were cruelly cut short, but their stories continue to resonate, reminding us of the human cost of this tragic case. The legacy of the Long Island serial killer, while marred by tragedy, is also a testament to human resilience and the relentless pursuit of justice. Despite the darkness, the search for answers continues, and with it, the hope that one day the truth will finally come to light. Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of Serial Killers Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, subscribe to Serial Killers Podcast on Spotify. Subscribe now.